Members of Parliament, support staff, radio listeners, TV viewers, all those following this meeting via social media, members of the media, persons in the tribune here at Parliament, good afternoon. And welcome to the continuation of urgent public meeting number 19 for today, Wednesday, August the 13th, 2025. At this time, I want to give a special word of welcome to the Honorable Minister of Justice, Ms. Natalie Tacklin, and her support staff here present this afternoon. We have established a quorum of 12 members. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. I have received 2 notices so far, one being of absence from MP Waiver and one of lateness from MP Peterson. Before going over to the notification round for members here present, I just wish to give an update on a matter that I referenced to in the meeting yesterday, and that was regarding the outstanding meeting list of Parliament. I have the list before me, and the list will be shared with members of Parliament, but I do want to just make a general comment in terms of some of the matters that are currently pending for the meeting either to take place or to continue. For example, we have several draft laws regarding finances. We have one pertaining to changes to several tax ordinances. This is a draft received from the government of St. Martin, the Minister of Finance in particular. We have a draft pertaining to changes to the general tax law as well. In fact, both of these go back to October respectively November of 2023. I do want to repeat that 2024 for Parliament and Parliament's duties was not a regular year with 2 elections, changes of government, etc., etc. And we have several central committee meetings to continue, and also several meetings requested by third parties to be scheduled with the Parliament of St. Martin. As I mentioned, I'll also prepare a synopsis of these meetings for the general public, but the members of Parliament will receive the complete overview, where we stand, whether it's continuation, new meeting to be called. But I do want to add here that for meetings that are requested and in which the presence of one or more ministers is requested, it of course depends on the minister to be here for the meeting. If the meeting request entails also a request to a minister to be present, then of course we will have to await the positive response from the minister or ministers in order to have the discussion. From the list that will be provided to the members of Parliament, you will be able to take note the requests that have been made to ministers over the period of time in terms of attending to meetings. Of course, when it comes to draft legislation coming from the government, it is when the government or the minister to defend his or her draft legislation, they will come to Parliament and the meeting can take place. So as I mentioned, we have several outstanding also committee meetings to be held and requests from members of the public for meetings with Parliament. I will also provide, and I hope to be able to do that in tomorrow's meeting, an overview of the state of the answering of questions by the ministers of government to members of Parliament. That is one of the fundamental rights of Parliament, to, outside of meetings, ask ministers questions on on topics, and thus that overview too will be provided. The scheduling of the meetings to which I referred earlier will not start, but will definitely continue in an accelerated form, trying to get as many of them out of the way as possible. However, we are going to try to do it chronologically as much as possible. Unless a matter is considered time sensitive, then of course that one will be elevated or pushed forward to be scheduled. So with that brief notification as a follow-up to what I mentioned yesterday about a list of overview of meetings to be scheduled, and as well as answers to be given by ministers of government, I look for the members of parliament who now wish to also use the possibility for notifications, and I start with MP Ottley. MP Ottley, you have the floor for notifications.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good day to the Honorable Minister of Justice, viewing and listening public, my honorable colleagues. Madam Chair, I am happy to hear the way that you are explaining the public on the outstanding meetings and your plans for Parliament on the way forward. I'm happy to hear that also the redacted report from BTP concerning GEBE's tariffs has been submitted to Parliament. With that being said, we have requested an urgent public meeting to handle this matter. There's discrepancies, there's unrest at GEBE. Middle management is requesting the removal of the CEO with a timeline. The government expects the entire supervisory board to resign, and then we still have the long-awaited relief for the people of St. Martin. I see an article right here says fuel clause mismanagement, the discrepancies draining consumers. So I'm happy to hear from your person that this meeting is top on your agenda, and also on behalf of the No faction, Up faction, and National Alliance faction, we have submitted an urgent meeting request to handle such matter. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Ottley. I now continue, and I give the floor to MP Doran.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Pleasant good afternoon to you, my colleagues, the persons in the Tribune, and a special good afternoon to the people of St. Martin. Madam Chair, I could not just sit back and listen in terms of the explanation with regards to availability of ministers. I would like to thank you for the point you brought forth in terms of wanting to decrease the backlog. However, there's something called the vervangingsregeling, which clearly stipulates if A minister is not available, B minister would attend in the place. And I have not seen that happen much. We saw it happen with the Ministry of Justice, where the Minister of Finance represented during the budget debate, and I would like to see that happen more often, because to say that we cannot do our job as oversight of the government because a minister is not available for so many months, I find that quite misleading, and I just wanted to bring that forward so that the population can know that there are regulations for when ministers are not available. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Doran. I now give the floor to MP Lewis. MP Lewis, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Honorable Minister of Justice and your support staff. Good afternoon to my colleagues here. Good afternoon to the people of St. Martin. I would like to echo the same sentiments as they were already on my mind, Madam Chair. Thank you for that great explanation. Because in one of your statements, you mentioned the continuation of the urgent meeting that was put on hold, I think, from since May. The people's business is very important, and this is like going to the medical center and you're going to the emergency and you have to stay there as wait. I don't know how urgent it is, but with the matters at hand, we already received other documentation for meetings requests, other urgent meeting requests, be it closed door or public, also from within justice. And Madam Chair, now today we're going to listen to the answers of the minister and hoping that we get the answers that to the questions that was given. And also, if there's any further clarification, I too have some more questions that I would like to ask the minister if they're not answered based on her presentation. But Madam Chair, through you, urgent is urgent. My colleague mentioned there is a vervangingsregeling. The work continues. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Lewis. I now give the floor to MP Irian. MP Irian, you have the floor for notifications.
Good afternoon, all. Madam Chair, thank you for your update regarding the meetings and questions. Madam Chair, you made a very good point. You said that it's also the right of Parliament to send these letters and question the government. And during the budget debate, it was said, motions are sometimes useless and so forth, but if we are bringing motions, if you're calling meetings, if you're sending letters, you don't get responses, the ministers don't show up, that's why motions become important, because we don't get to execute our other rights. And what I would like to actually hear is, outside of the lateness of meetings and the lateness of answering letters, why? Why don't the ministers respond? We have letters that have gone on for 3 months already. We don't get any responses regarding ministers' availability. We don't get any responses in terms of, hey, the relevant minister can't make it, so the replacement minister will come. We get zero communications regarding these things. So I would like not just update on, yes, we will now expedite the current backlog, because we're going to have a new backlog again soon, because we're going to call more meetings. So what are we going to do to prevent this from happening in the future? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Irian, and the other MPs for your comments on the notifications. Thank you, I think it was MP Ottley who reminded us of the fact that the redacted report, the redacted Regulatory Agency of Curaçao, BTP report, as requested, as I mentioned, has been received. It has been received by Parliament, and of course the members have received that as well. So I also want to use the opportunity to say thank you to the Prime Minister for reacting so quickly to my request for the previously labeled confidential RAC-BTP report to give the redacted version for Parliament then to decide what we want to do with it, if anything. I also think in the same context of the comments by MP Ottley to mention that we have a confirmed Central Committee meeting on GEBE for the 27th of August of this year, of course, at 2 p.m. I just want to mention that here, and also towards the public. And thirdly, with respect to the substitution regulation for ministers, there is a formal substitution regulation, as several of the members of Parliament have mentioned, and I want to note in that context that every letter that goes out inviting a minister to be present based on either a draft law or a request by members for a meeting, it is mentioned that if the respective minister cannot be there as we are proposing, so based on the schedule that we'll be proposing, we would appreciate the substitute minister to be present here at Parliament. Again, it is within the purview of the minister to decide whether he or she or his or her substitute minister, substitute colleague will be present. I also think it's important to know that in addition to sending motions that are passed here in Parliament to the government, every letter that is sent out, which have to go according to our rules of order through the chair, every letter that is sent out by me on behalf of members of Parliament asking questions to one or more ministers, it is mentioned, one, that according to our rules of order, these questions should be answered within a period of 3 weeks. And it is also mentioned in the letter that if that is not possible, that then Parliament be told, Parliament be informed, and if several questions can be answered and not others, that we also be informed of that. So that is the communication where it regards, one, inviting ministers to meetings of Parliament based on requests or based on whether it be a draft law or whatever from a minister, as well as with respect to the matter of the answering questions of members of Parliament. Again, that overview with questions and the responses that if we receive any from the ministers with respect to needing more time to answer, if we have that, then that will also be included in the overview. So thank you once again, members, for those who have contributed in notification. And we now go over to the agenda point for this meeting. And that is deliberations with the Minister of Justice on the escalating state of crime, the deteriorating conditions at the Point Blanche Prison, and the vulnerable state of the Justice Ministry. This request with that description is registered here at Parliament on the IS document number 1050-1050, and it is dated May 16th of this year. It was requested by the members Ottley, Lacroes, and Lewis. I just want to remind the members of Parliament and the general public that the possibility for making use of the interruption lectern is with the members of Parliament, so that possibility exists. And I just would highlight that asking the members to ensure that these interruptions would seek clarification if necessary, challenge assertions which are made, or contribute additional information to the topic of discussion. They should always be brief, the interruptions, and brief remarks or questions without any long introduction. So going back to the agenda point, as I mentioned, we received this request on May 16th from the members who I just listed, and the presence of the Minister of Justice was also requested. We started this meeting on May 20th, so 4 days after we received the letter, and the Minister of Justice gave some opening remarks and provided a presentation on the requested topic. In accordance with the speakers list, thereafter, members of Parliament were given the opportunity to pose questions to the Minister in the first round. The Minister then addressed some issues that were raised by members of Parliament, and following that, the meeting was adjourned to give the Minister the time to prepare the answers posed in the first round. So hence this meeting today. That is the point that we're at with respect to that meeting. And so I give the floor to the Honorable Minister of Justice, Ms. Natalie Tacklin, to answer the questions posed by members of Parliament in the first round of this public meeting. Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Just checking that the mic is working. Yes, all right. Honorable Chair, members of Parliament, and of course to the viewing public at home or those listening on the radio. We're here today to continue our discussion on the fire and riot that took place at the Point Blanche Prison on May 14th. When I last prepared before you, our focus was on the immediate crisis, restoring order, ensuring the safety of detainees and staff, and beginning the painstaking work of stabilizing operations. In the months since, we've worked tirelessly to address the damage, both physical and institutional, that this event brought to light. One thing is certain, the arson and riot exposed not only the vulnerabilities in the physical infrastructure of the Point Blanche Prison, but also the many years of neglect in its management and operations. Today I can report that all inmates previously displaced, if I can get this to work, to the Foreigner Detention Center and the Phillipsburg Police Station have returned to their designated cells at Point Blanche. Transfers from the police station were completed within 24 hours in full compliance with the Court of First Instance rulings that we were facing at the time. While inmates relocated to Bonaire remain there for the medium term, we're working to safely bring them back. Electrical power has been restored, and final works on the ground floor are underway. Fire detection systems are operational, with upgrades to alarm connectivity in progress, and plans are in place for expanded CCTV coverage. Cell scraping and cleaning are complete, and painting is in process. Importantly, programs are returning. The GED classroom has been relocated to a more secure area and resumed operations this Monday. Sewing classes are also back in session. We've also met with JNIS to restart reintegration programs, and discussions are progressing to resume programs that were halted after the fire. Gym sessions, music classes, and inmate labor assignments are also active. The temporary suspension of rights and privileges has been lifted, and regular visits resumed on June 12th. Family visits have also been introduced to allow inmates more meaningful contact with their families. This special event is organized every other month and provides inmates with the opportunity to spend extended quality time with their children, parents, partners, or other close family members in a relaxed and supportive setting. Our prison recovery is not happening in isolation. It's tied to a broader vision for justice reform, one that even took me to Strasbourg 2 months ago at the beginning of June. I had the honor of representing St. Martin at the Council of Europe, where I addressed the Committee of Ministers regarding the procedure concerning the landmark case of Corallo versus the Netherlands, a case which puts us under actually extensive supervision by the Council of Europe. This was an opportunity to engage directly with the representatives of 46 member states on detainee rights, justice system reforms, and our compliance with human rights treaties applicable via the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Beyond the plenary debate, I held bilateral meetings with the European Court of Human Rights, the European Committee for the Prevention of Torture, the CPT, and senior officials across human rights, education, and youth divisions. These engagements reinforce St. Martin's commitment to a justice system grounded in human rights, with an emphasis on capacity building, mental health in detention, reintegration, and alternatives to incarceration. On July 31st, we signed a landmark €3.8 million agreement with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, otherwise known as the UNODC, to launch the Advanced SXM program. This is a 4-year initiative that will provide structured rehabilitation and reintegration pathways for inmates, and, equally important, will invest in the men and women who serve on the front lines of our prison system. For too long, these officers have carried out their duties under extremely difficult, and let's be very honest here today, dangerous conditions, without the full resources, tools, and institutional support that they deserve. Through Advanced SXM, correctional officers will benefit from a comprehensive training and development plan aimed at increasing professionalism, morale, and long-term retention. Institutional policies, procedures, and codes of conduct will also be revised and standardized, ensuring that staff have a safe, structured, and supportive work environment. By pairing rehabilitation for inmates with investment in our staff, we're restoring both the operational and human foundations of our justice system. This is how we begin to undo years of institutional neglect and build a prison service that reflects the fairness, dignity, and professionalism that we expect from our justice chain. In addition to these operational and human resource investments, preparations for the construction of the new prison are moving forward according to plan, with work scheduled to begin in the 4th quarter of this year. To be clear, we're actually in the process right now within the next week of awarding the bid to a qualified contractor. This project will more than double our current detention capacity and is being planned in close coordination with the operational efforts in the works. By aligning physical reconstruction with the institutional and human capacity building taking place through Advanced SXM, we're ensuring that when the doors of this new facility open, it will be more than just a modern, pretty building. It will be a fully equipped, professionally staffed, and rehabilitation-focused institution. At the same time, we're developing a new collaboration with the Aruba-based organization Tudo Está Possível, or in English, Everything is Possible, and our own St. Martin Development Fund, the SMDF. Together, we're hoping to adapt an innovative EU funding rehabilitation programs locally. These initiatives, which come at no cost to the government of St. Martin, are particularly valuable given the ongoing strain on the national budget. By tapping into the European Solidarity Corps funding, we can introduce programs in creative arts, social enterprise, and post-relief volunteer opportunities without adding to our local expenditures. This partnership will complement the structured frameworks introduced through the U.N.O.E.C agreement, ensuring that our rehabilitation efforts are both financially sustainable and impactful. These steps, recovery at Point Blanche, international engagement in Strasbourg, the launch of advanced SXM, the construction of the new prison, and the EU-funded rehabilitation initiatives are all connected by a single aim: to build a fairer, more effective, and more humane system in St. Martin. Before I proceed with answering the previously posed questions, I want to also briefly acknowledge the other part that was the other topic in this agenda point, which we didn't get time to touch on the last time, which is the rise in crime. The discussion about a rise in crime must be grounded in facts and not just a perception or the feeling that you get in the pit of your stomach. To this end, we're finalizing an in-depth analysis of crime data over the recent years, and I hope that I will be able to return and be invited to Parliament to brief you on those findings once they're complete. In the meantime, I want to recognize the work of KPSM, which the public has also seen reflected in recent media reports. For the first half of 2025, we see targeted enforcement producing results. Arrests to week 32 are higher than the same period last year. There have been 5 robberies of jewelry stores this year, and arrests were made in 4 of the 5 cases, with suspects caught in the act in 3 of them. Weapon seizures so far are already close to the last year's total, so we expect that that amount will be higher this year. The number of traffic accidents is down, which we attribute to preventive campaigns, traffic controls, and citations. The volume of 911 calls is lower, suggesting fewer reported incidents. The number of tickets issued is higher than at this time last year, reflecting a more repressive posture where needed. We're applying a hotspot approach and strengthening our chain cooperation and regional police cooperation to improve both our information position and our ability to act swiftly. Regionally, there's been an observable uptick in firearm-related incidents, gang-related violence, and organized crime. A deeper study for the islands within the kingdom is underway to inform a joint response. Information sharing across the region, particularly on firearms, is also being intensified. But crime is not only a justice issue. Its root cause lie in socioeconomic deprivation and limited opportunity, and the mingling of the underworld and upper world through money laundering and the misuse of legitimate businesses to undermine the rule of law. A whole-of-government approach is required. Prioritization and budget allocation are therefore essential if we're to meet this challenge effectively. Chair Lady, members of Parliament, this concludes my update on the progress at Point Blanche and our international engagements and the reforms in the works to improve conditions at the prison and to strengthen our justice system overall. I'll now go into answering the questions that were posed in the first round. I'll start off with the questions posed by MP O.E.C. What about an inspection by a structural assessment by VROMI or ICE? The structural integrity of the affected area was inspected by VROMI as well as by an engineer from UNOPS. The second question was, if this took place, what were the findings? The structural integrity has been found to not have been affected by the fire due to the fire retardant paint that was used in the damaged area by the fire. Question number 3, when can the staff expect batch 13? Batch 13 has been completed and disseminated. All other remaining batches will be completed before the end of Q4. Can clarity be provided regarding additional insurance or risk coverage, if any, does the current justice staff have, in particular the staff of the prison, but also KPSM and staff that fall under the same type of category? Or is this something currently being worked on by the minister? The prison itself does not fall under the rechtspositiebesluit politie. However, for all personnel that do fall under that decree, such as the KPSM staff, the government is liable for any injury or death in the line of duty. This liability is embedded in the rights framework of that rechtspositiebesluit. At present, there is no separate or additional insurance policy beyond this statutory provision. That said, my ministry is working together with the Ministry of Finance to explore what options are available for additional coverage with a view to including this in the 2026 budget process. Then I move on to the questions from MP Lewis. Is the prison facility insured? Yes, the prison facility is insured. Question number 2, What is the status of the insurance that has been approved by the government based on Article 114, Chapter 10 of the Respositiebesluit Politie? The national decree, the LB, to implement the insurance was returned by the governor's cabinet last year because it required some substantial amount of corrections. In addition, the approved coverage was then for the year 2024, which we found then would not make sense to apply it retroactively at this point. For that reason, we're now exploring what other options we have together with the Ministry of Finance with the intention of including a feasible arrangement into the 2026 budget. It's important to note that this type of insurance is intended to leverage and mitigate government's financial risk, and in the event of an injury or death to personnel falling under that Respositiebesluit, government remains fully liable regardless of whether an insurance policy is in place or not. Then I have the question, how is SOAB getting the data from Loan and Salaris to do validations? I can confirm that SOAB is not receiving any information from Loan and Salaris. Then I go on to our data and files leaving the administration building for this validation. SOAB is being provided with the physical files by the ministry, and they are returning these files once the validations are completed. Did workers agree for the transfer of files and data to SOAB? No, however, SOAB has been engaged in this process from inception by previous ministers, or by the previous minister, Minister Anna Richardson, and SOAB has also signed a non-disclosure agreement. Will the HR workers of each division be consulted on these validations, or is SOAB just going to work from the placement letters? All files will be processed by the ministry's HR department. If deemed necessary, the respective department will be contacted. Who will verify that the placement letters are correct? Placements are verified against the placement matrix. Who at SOAB has the knowledge about every justice department to know that functions and function levels are correct for this validation? SOAB assigns tasks to their staff accordingly, also taking into consideration the core tasks of SOAB to provide a tailor-made service to the government. What is it going to cost the country for SOAB to do these validations? There's no additional cost to the Ministry of Justice, as this currently falls under the government's audit plan that we have with SOAB. Is finance going to accept these validations just because SOAB did them? Yes, the Ministry of Finance has agreed to accept the validation from SOAB. Question number 12. The MP has been updated that batch 13 has been sent back by the governor for ratification. Can you confirm whether this is true? And if so, what specifics are required for this long-awaited batch? The batch was not sent back because there were any errors or anything like that. So in that respect, this was untrue. We can confirm that the batch has since been signed off by both the governor and the minister and has since been disseminated. Then I move on to the questions from MP Ottley. What was the cause of the riot? I want to start by saying that while there can be no justification for acts of violence, destruction, and endangering the safety of others, that the unrest stemmed from a long-standing misunderstanding among certain inmates regarding the legal framework on early release and the use of ankle bracelets. Many prisoners were confused after hearing reports and reading in the news media that suspects charged with similar offenses such as robbery or possession of firearms were being released from pretrial detention pending a court verdict. This discrepancy has led to a significant tension within the prison population. Inmates question why those individuals were allowed to return home, while they themselves remain incarcerated for what they feel are seemingly similar circumstances. The inmates themselves do not seem to differentiate between pretrial detention and actual sentences. A specific point of concern was the perceived inconsistency in the application of electronic monitoring. Inmates expressed frustration over the use of ankle bracelets due to a lack of understanding of the policy, and they saw it as a substitute for incarceration, which it is not. It is a controlled, legally regulated measure used in specific cases. This lack of understanding and perceived inequality created confusion and unrest among the inmates, which subsequently resulted in this riot and fire. Has the matter been resolved? The ministry has made clear to the Inmates Association that such behavior will not be tolerated and that the policy decisions are made within the legal framework. At the same time, steps are being taken at the policy level to address the concerns raised. The ministry is currently reviewing the existing early release policy, specifically the regulation that allows inmates to be considered for release after serving 2/3 of their sentence. And this review includes the possibility of reducing or adjusting the threshold, which could allow for earlier conditional release under certain circumstances. This initiative forms part of a broader effort to bring St. Martin's correctional policies more in line with practices seen in other parts of the kingdom. This was communicated to the Inmates Association, emphasizing that the current legal framework and any forthcoming adjustments remain a priority in order to reduce tensions and prevent further misunderstandings. And we'll also, of course, be going further into detail on those when we respond to the 2 motions presented during the budget debate. Is there any truth to the reports of a disturbance at the FDC in Simpson Bay, where some of the inmates from Point Blanche had been temporarily transferred? Yes. After the transfer of several inmates from Point Blanche to FDC in Simpson Bay for temporary housing, the inmates were placed in a secure holding area, and a planned search operation was conducted to ensure safety and security. The search resulted in the confiscation of illegal contraband, including cell phones and marijuana. Upon being returned to their temporary holding area following the search, some inmates expressed dissatisfaction by threatening staff and threatening to repeat what was done in Point Blanche a few days earlier. However, the situation was quickly brought under control by prison personnel with the assistance of the arrest team from KPSM. No major injuries or damage were reported. What time was the emergency team deployed? The prison itself does not have an emergency team due to the lack of manpower, and therefore, when incidents occur, KPSM is usually immediately alerted and head up to Point Blanche to offer their assistance. In this case, that was as soon as the minister received a phone call of the disturbance going on. What is the international standard ratio of custodial staff, guards, to prisoners? There's no single international standard for prison-to-staff ratios, as this varies with a prison's design, security level, and their service model. European benchmark data from the Council of Europe and Eurostat indicates an average of about 2 inmates per staff member with well-resourced systems, closer to 1 and 1.5, and stretched systems being above 3 or 4. Globally, the average is higher, with some countries exceeding 7 inmates per staff. These figures provide a general reference, but the right ratio really depends on the type of facility and the range of functions that you're performing. It's worth noting that in St. Martin's case, we operate a single facility, whereas many prison systems have multiple prisons, shared resources, and centralized service centers, which skew any direct comparison of those numbers one-to-one. How many prisoners were transferred to the Foreigner Detention Center in Simpson Bay? A total of 12 inmates were transferred to FDC, and these inmates were the ones that were housed in the section internally within Point Blanche known as Preventief, which typically accommodates individuals in pretrial or preventive detention. This transfer was part of a temporary relocation strategy to facilitate repairs and return to normalcy. What steps were taken at the Foreigner Detention Center in Simpson Bay to accommodate the transferred prisoners? The inmates transferred to the FDC in Simpson Bay were housed in a fully functional facility with beds, running water, and electricity. Although relocated, these inmates remained under the jurisdiction and regulations of the Point Blanche Prison, ensuring continuity and oversight and discipline. To support their well-being during the temporary transfer, inmates were provided with access to television, airtime for phone calls, and recreational activities, including games. These provisions were implemented to maintain acceptable standards of care and to uphold basic inmate rights throughout their stay at FDC. What is the legal basis for transferring prisoners to the Foreigner Detention Center in Simpson Bay? The legal authority for the transfer of the inmates in Simpson Bay was established through a ministerial decree signed by the Minister of Justice. This decree provided the necessary legal framework to temporarily place inmates at the FDC, ensuring that the transfer was conducted in accordance with legal provisions and administrative procedures. How many prisoners sustained burn injuries, and is it true that the wounded inmates did not receive medical attention? A total of 3 inmates sustained burn injuries. Contrary to reports suggesting otherwise, all inmates received the necessary medical treatment in a timely manner. The nature of the injuries was as follows. Inmate number 1, burns on both hands. Inmate number 2, burns on one hand and part of the face. Inmate number 3, burns on both arms. Medical attention was provided in accordance with established protocols to ensure the health and safety of the affected individuals. What was the reason for implementing restrictions at the prison, and what is the legal basis for doing so? The restrictions were implemented in response to the riot and fire, which caused significant damage to the prison infrastructure. As a result, temporary measures had to be taken to ensure the safety and security of all inmates and staff within the facility. The key impacts included a loss of electricity in the affected areas of that cross building where the fire occurred, the need to relocate inmates to other sections of the prison, and the fact that the recreational and visiting rooms were being repurposed for temporary housing. Despite these restrictions, procedures essential to legal proceedings were maintained to uphold the rights of the inmates. The legal basis for these measures is found in Articles 31 and 32 of the prison regulations. Then I will take the following questions all together as they all relate to early release and Article 137 and overcrowding. The first one references Curaçao and Aruba and plans there, whether or not the minister invokes Article 137 or has plans to do so due to overcrowding, and then regarding probational release. The MP also asked if I was aware of certain recommendations. So I'm not exactly sure which recommendations the MP is referring to. However, the ministry is aware of the recommendations from oversight bodies like the Council of Law Enforcement and the Progress Committee, the Voortgangscommissie, Commissie Plannen van Aanpak. In the short term, the Ministry of Justice is engaging Kingdom partners in Curaçao, Aruba, and the Netherlands to assist with temporary detention capacity. We're optimizing inmate placement by reviewing the classification and case status to ensure efficient cell use. This means that the OM, who is responsible for the just execution of court sentences and for pretrial cases, together with the prison and the other parties involved, is checking if inmates are in the right place. For example, people who are awaiting trial or who are low risk should not take up cell space if we really don't need to. We also check if somebody's case is almost finished or if they might qualify for early release. By doing so, we make sure that we use every cell in the smartest way and free up as much space as possible. We also apply Article 137, also known as the treintje, and I know that we talked a lot in previous meetings about the treintjebeleid. This is always applied for eligible detainees, and this is done in close cooperation with the prosecutor's office to create urgent capacity while maintaining public safety. The so-called treintje mechanism under Article 137 of the Penal Code has been applied since 2015 when the new Penal Code came into effect and is considered continuously. Its use is strictly regulated and detainees must meet statutory eligibility criteria. What is the role of the OM for conditional release? The OM is legally responsible for the proper execution of court sentences and plays a coordinating role in both conditional release and early conditional release. Together with the prison and the probation office, it assesses whether a detainee meets the legal requirements before the case is sent to the Central Probation Council for advice to the minister. Is the electronic policy being used? The legal basis for electronic monitoring is set out in the Penal Code and the Penal Procedure Code. It is used selectively and mainly as part of conditional release and early conditional release, or in certain pretrial cases. The electronic monitoring policy from the Netherlands Antilles, allowing conditional release to be extended by up to 6 months, became obsolete when the current Penal Code took effect in 2015 and was therefore revoked. How many have been used to alleviate the overcrowding? The ministry is continuously applying Article 137 of the Penal Code to address prison overcrowding. However, not every person released under this provision is placed under electronic monitoring. Further to that, due to budgetary limitations, we have budgetary and staffing limitations. We have a limited number of ankle bracelets available, which are used on a rotating basis. By law, ankle bracelets may only be applied in specific situations, such as early or conditional release or pretrial detention. Because they restrict freedom and privacy, their use is subject to strict legal criteria and cannot be applied indiscriminately. Is there data to support a rise in crime? As I referenced in my opening, we're working on some more consolidated data to be able to compare trends over various years. So we do not have complete police statistics at this point to compare with last year. However, based on the half a year so far, in recent meetings with the police and the OM, it was noted that arrests have gone up from over 300 last year to more than 400 so far this year. This does not automatically mean an overall crime and a rise in crime, because it could also just mean that we're more effective in catching people. But those full statistics for us to be able to draw those conclusions I'm still awaiting those, and I've been told today that they're almost complete. But until then, we're working closely together with the police and the OM to watch the trends and act where needed. Is the minister aware that Aruba has reduced sentences by 10%? Why can't we look into this? I'm not familiar with the details of Aruba's policy, but I can assure the MP that we already apply such percentages, and even more than 10% in individual cases on the basis of Article 137. Such a general measure across the board applying a reduction of 10%, however, would require LBHAM, and thus a sound and valid and sustainable motivation that could withstand review by the Council of Advice. And maybe good to clarify on this point, 137 kicks in once the ministry or the minister is informed that there is an urgent need for capacity or space. And at that time, we look to see who is next in line and eligible. And in some of those cases, we are giving reductions of more than quite a bit more than 10%. Can the minister provide an update on the 2018 Law Enforcement Council report? In 2018, the Council for Law Enforcement issued 2 follow-up reports on the Point Blanche Prison. A follow-up investigation into internal safety and public security, and a follow-up investigation into the legal position, staffing, and organization. These assess the extent to which recommendations from 2016 had been implemented, also taking into account the impact of Hurricane Irma. The then Minister of Justice formally responded to both reports, and the responses were transmitted to Parliament and published on the Council's website. In 2019, the Council published a further report covering all detention facilities in St. Martin, which can be regarded as an update to the 2018 findings. The key issues identified were overcrowding, insufficient cell space per inmate, staffing shortages, and safety risks, which all, of course, remain relevant today. The ministry continues to use the Council's reports, together with those of other oversight bodies, such as the Progress Committee and the CPT, as reference points for our ongoing reforms. What is actively being done to address the recommendations? The ministry addresses the recommendations through implementing urgent capacity relief, as I mentioned in the previous question answer, advancing the phased construction of the new prison with UNOPS, designed to meet international human rights and safety standards, with delivery scheduled in stages leading up to full capacity by 2028. And then, of course, our institutional strengthening via our program with the UNODC, which is focused on capacity building, covering staff training, updating operational procedures, and management capacity development as well. And finally, we're strengthening our cooperation with our Kingdom partners for expertise and resources. What training programs are being provided to staff at the prison? In recent years, all prison guards have received formal training provided by the Dutch Custodial Training Institute at DAE. This training program is the same standardized curriculum used to train correctional officers in the Netherlands, ensuring a high level of professionalism and competency. Where appropriate, the training was customized to address the specific context and operational needs of St. Martin and the Point Blanche Prison. In addition, discussions have already taken place with the management of the fire department to support upcoming training in emergency response. This initiative aims to enhance staff preparedness in handling emergencies, such as fires, evacuations, and medical incidents. These training efforts are part of our ongoing commitment to strengthening institutional capacity and ensuring safety and efficiency of prison operations. What is the procedure in the event of a riot, and at what point is the minister notified? The Point Blanche Prison currently does not have a dedicated riot response team. In the event of a riot, the following procedures are followed. First, the prison director immediately informs the Minister of Justice about the situation, and then assistance is requested from KPSM through the Chief of Police to regain control and restore order within the facility. This immediate notification and response protocol ensures that the appropriate authorities are promptly engaged and that the public safety and institutional security are prioritized. What is the role of SAGE Consultancy in the handling of placement of the Have Bay staff? SAGE Consultancy was engaged to manage the placement process of the Have Bay staff. This assignment was initiated at the request of the former Minister of Justice, Anna Richardson, and the Secretary General, Ms. Florence Marlin. The consultancy was tasked with overseeing and facilitating the proper alignment and placement of staff within the Have Bay. Once notification is given of a developing situation, what protocols are in place for responding to incidents such as fires or riots as occurred in this case? Established protocols dictate that the control room or central command serves as the first point of contact. The shift supervisor or watch commander then assumes control and informs the director/management team, and all available staff reports to the command post for instructions. And the central post alerts the medical team to be on standby, and if necessary, the fire brigade of potential fire hazards. What time was the director notified of an issue? The director was first notified at 3:30 p.m. of disruptive behavior in the housing area. Prior to this, a separate incident occurred outside the GED classroom in the morning involving a single inmate, which was resolved. Once the riot began, the unit head of the housing informed the director, who subsequently notified the minister. Discussions were held with inmates associations to determine the cause of the discussions were held with the inmates association to determine the cause of the disruption, and the minister was updated accordingly. Moving on to MP Roseberg. Question number 1. Is the minister still up to date with the LBAs, particularly in relation to the current issue? Yes, the process is proceeding as planned. Question number 2. What plan is in place to address the current challenges with staffing capacity and the guard-to-inmate ratio? Several strategic measures are being pursued to ensure that staffing capacity is improved and the guard-to-inmate ratio meets operational requirements. I can also say that building the prison is a lot easier than us being able to fix the staffing issues that are going on there, unfortunately. But we're therefore following a number of trajectories that all have to run concurrently in order to be able to resolve the situation. The first priority, of course, is allocating sufficient budget in 2026, which would allow us to hire an additional amount of FTEs. Presently, we're looking at an amount of 15 that we would like to hire in 2026 to start training and recruitment so that we can be ready for phase 1 in March 2027. As part of that, we'll also in the next month or two, I hope for Parliament also to see, we'll be trying to launch an innovative, different way of us recruiting staff and looking into a campaign to make it attractive for individuals to come and work at Point Blanche, show what the new facility is going to look like, what type of working conditions we'll be able to provide at that time, and explore all these different recruitment avenues to be able to attract staff. We'll also be reevaluating with the UNODC the amounts that we're paying, the salaries that we're paying at Point Blanche, looking at how we can make these more even with the private sector. You know, I continue to say there's no reason a private security guard should make more money than our correctional staff up at the prison. So these are all things that we want to evaluate as well when we look at realistically being able to attract and hire qualified personnel to work in the prison. Then, however, on the short term, we also have a situation where we need people yesterday. In that respect, I'm currently assessing the feasibility of a short-term increase in external, temporary, qualified staff that can address the urgent capacity needs. This includes exploring potential avenues for funding, both within our national budget, but also through possible support from the Netherlands. And in us to look at, you know, how really for the rest of this year, we would be able to assist the people up there at Point Blanche that are working, showing up every day to work and really can use that extra support so that they can also get a break and also get time to have new training and to be able to see how other facilities function. So these are all part of our plans that we're working on right now to try to increase that institutional capacity. Then, what is the timeline for housing the inmates at the Foreigner Detention Center? On Monday, June 9th, there was a full transfer of the inmates back to their cells. And then I can also say that the temporary restrictions were also lifted on June 9th. That was the next question about the restrictions. Then I move on to MP Lacroes. What is the reason that the female inmates were sent to Bonaire? The decision to transfer the female inmates to Bonaire was based on several key considerations. Following the fire, inmates had to be relocated to various areas within the prison facility to optimize the available holding areas with the necessary amenities. Yeah.
I need to ask you to indulge with me for a moment, as I have noticed and been informed that we did not have a quorum, but we will have in 2 minutes, 1 second. We do have a quorum, and you were able to take a sip of water, and you may continue.
All right, so yes. As I was saying, following the fire, we had to Yes, okay, I can continue.
We're good.
All right.
From your side, you may.
Yes, from my side. For those viewing at home, they can't see what's going on behind the scenes.
In the back. Okay.
All right. So as I was saying, we had to relocate and kind of reprioritize the way that we were using space. And that meant that the largest group of inmates was placed in the main cell complex, while the female inmates were temporarily being housed in the visiting room. This arrangement was to provide kind of an overall safety and security. And at that same time, the recovery timeline for the facility was uncertain. Of the 6 female inmates, 4 of them were eligible for conditional release, leaving 2 of them occupying the visiting room. So to free up that space, those 2 female inmates were transferred to Bonaire so that we would be able to utilize that space. Then a total of 6 inmates were traveled to Bonaire under the Onderlinge Regeling Detentie, the ORD agreement, 4 male inmates and 2 female inmates. On Friday, July 25th, the 2 female inmates were flown back to St. Martin and are now back at the Point Blanche facility. And 2 of the 4 inmates on the male side are scheduled to return this week, with arrangements being made for the final 2. Then, can you elaborate on the issue of pretrial detention? Is the unrest among inmates related to this? Yes, the issue did contribute to unrest among inmates, primarily due to long-standing misunderstandings on their part regarding pretrial detention, early release policies, and the use of electronic monitoring. Many inmates, often relying on incomplete information or assumptions, became confused after seeing media reports of suspects charged with similar offenses, such as robbery or firearm possession, being released from the police cells pending their court verdict. They, in many cases, frequently fail to distinguish between pretrial detention and serving a sentence after a conviction. A key point of frustration has been the perceived inconsistency in the application of electronic monitoring, as inmates mistakenly view an ankle bracelet as a replacement for their incarcerations, when in fact it's controlled and legally regulated measure. This lack of understanding and confusion and frustration is what partially contributed to the fire and the riot. What initiatives are being taken to strengthen and restore trust between the director, guards, and inmates? What is the plan? There's no conflict or tension between the prison director, staff, and the inmates. Throughout the crisis, the director engaged with the inmates daily and, together with staff, personally assisted several inmates in the cleanup efforts. What is the ethical standard? Is it true that the guards left their post? Are there any repercussions to that? Guards did not abandon their post. When the inmates began rioting, several female officers moved to a secure location for their safety, recognizing that the situation had escalated. Is there an independent body overseeing the decisions taken by the prison director? There are several independent bodies responsible for overseeing the decisions made by the prison director. We have the supervisory committee, the Commissie van Toezicht. This commission specifically oversees the day-to-day operations within the prison, ensuring that inmates' rights are respected and that procedures are followed appropriately. They actually visit the prison monthly, speak to the inmates, and also provide reports to the minister and the prison management. In addition, a broader systemic oversight is carried out by the Law Enforcement Council, the Raad voor de Rechtshandhaving, as we say in Dutch, which reports publicly on the detention conditions and management practices, and by the Progress Committee, the Voortgangscommissie, Plannen van Aanpak, which monitors compliance with agreements made under the plans of approach. They also visit here twice a year and write an extensive report. What measures are in place to report misconduct? For staff, disciplinary measures for staff are outlined in the LMA, and any staff misconduct is addressed in accordance with these legal provisions. For inmates, correctional officers are responsible for reporting inmate misconduct. These incidents are documented in written reports and handled internally based on established prison regulations. In cases of criminal misconduct, if an act by staff or inmates constitutes a criminal offense, that matter is referred to CAPISM. The police, in coordination with the Public Prosecutor's Office, may open a formal criminal investigation and prosecute the case before the competent court. Then moving on to MP O.E.C. Can another location be used as a temporary prison? Yes, under Articles 3, Paragraph 1 and 5, Paragraph 3 of the Landsverordening Beginselen Gevangeniswezen, the Ministry can formally designate other facilities as temporary huizen van bewaring, when the public interest so requires. In May 2025, this authority was used to create extra capacity due to the fire damage at the Point Blanche Prison by, 1, designating the police cells at E. Camille Richardson Street 24, the police station headquarters, as a huis van bewaring, and also designating the first floor of the Grenshospitium, the foreigner detention center at Simpson Bay, as a huis van bewaring. These designations allow convicted prisoners to be temporarily housed there under the supervision of the prison/huis van bewaring director. What are the requirements to be eligible for early release? Conditional early release, voorwaardelijke invrijheidstelling, or VI as we call it, and early conditional release are regulated in Articles 132 to 137 of the Penal Code and further detailed in the VI policy documents. Key eligibility requirements include: the detainee must be serving a custodial sentence of at least 1 year. VI is normally granted after 2/3 of the sentence being served. The detainee must have demonstrated good behavior during detention without serious disciplinary incidents. The Prison and Probation Office assesses the risk of reoffending, the detainee's reintegration prospects, and compliance with any special conditions. The Central Probation Council, CCR, then issues an advisory opinion to the minister, who makes a final decision. And I should add that CCR makes this advice based on an advice from the probation services and from the prison director. Release can be subject to conditions such as probation supervision, electronic monitoring, treatment programs, or also restraining orders. MP waiver. Are regular fire drills conducted in the prison? Currently, no regular fire drills are conducted. However, an evaluation has been completed and a new plan with improved agreements is being developed in collaboration with the fire department, which includes protocol development and training. The first meeting with the fire department has been held, and they are currently assessing the prison's emergency plans and protocols. Upon receiving the revised plans and protocols from the fire department, follow-up meetings will be scheduled to ensure implementation. Then I move on to the questions from MP Myers. How old is the prison facility? The current prison facility is 35 years old. I was told today, October 1990, to be specific. Was there any dialogue between the minister and the Inmates Association regarding this issue before the fire? Yes, I visited the Point Blanche prison both before and after the fire, and the issue of early release was discussed with the Inmate Association. Discussions were also held directly with the inmates themselves after the fire, and they were given the opportunity to share their concerns directly with me. How many batches are left to be completed? Batch 14 will be completed by the ministry within short. Simultaneously, the files are making their rounds within the ministry and awaiting the 2-week objection period provided to the staff in question. Pending the objections, the files can then be sent to the Ministry of Finance for further handling. So to be clear, for batch 14, all individuals in that batch have already received their provisional draft LBA, and they then have a 2-week period to object to that LBA or not. Batch 15 is in the preparation phase to have the draft LBAs be disseminated, meaning that the validation is complete. Now we're just drafting the LBAs and to the respective staff. And we expect that these will go out by the end of this week. The department heads will be handled in a separate batch by themselves. However, the validation process is complete. It was initially agreed upon that the department heads would be the last ones to receive their LBAs out of solidarity with the staff. And then batch 16, which will comprise the entirety of the Point Blanche Prison, is currently in its validation process. And as I've said to Parliament before, we are anticipating that this entire process will be complete by Q4 of this year. How long has the staffing ratio at the prison been at its current level? The prison has faced understaffing issues for a very long time. The last recruitment took place in 2019. And since then, several staff members have left the service. So this challenge is not a new one. Which minister implemented the early release policy? So actually, all ministers of justice, including this minister, have implemented some form of an early release policy. The concept of early release has been applied since the Netherlands Antilles on the basis of both the Penal Code of the Netherlands Antilles and the electronic monitoring regulation that existed at that time. These rules and regulations, or the policy, have since, in 2015, been replaced by the early release provisions contained in Articles 131 to 137 of the Penal Code. What is the number of violent and non-violent inmates currently in prison, and what is their placement based on the regimes and ability to be placed with any other inmates? Inmates are typically assigned to regimes based on the following: the degree of security required, the duration of their sentence, and their compatibility with other inmates. However, due to local gang affiliations, it's challenging to place inmates strictly according to this criteria. The categories of inmates based on their primary offense are as follows. For attempted manslaughter, manslaughter, or murder with or without a firearm, we currently have 41 inmates. Then we have robbery, theft, with or without a firearm, 19 inmates. Possession of a firearm, 10. Rape, 4. Bribery, 3. Aggravated assault, 2. Awaiting extradition, 1. Money laundering, 1. Human trafficking, 1. Most inmates have multiple offenses, but only their primary offense is reflected here. In reality, all inmates have the potential to be violent depending on the circumstances, making it difficult to provide exact numbers of violent versus non-violent. Then I move on to the questions from MP Arian. What is the cost of transferring the 6 prisoners to Bonaire? What is the timeline for this to be paid? The cost to transfer the 6 prisoners to Bonaire at this point stands at 21,207 guilders, which includes the return of 2 of the 4 inmates that are arriving this week. And due to the circumstances surrounding the request from assistance, our inmates were housed free of charge. And therefore, no payment timeline for the housing itself in Bonaire needs to be established. So these are just the transportation costs is what we ended up having to cover. Will you allocate unused CapEx, if there is any, from 2025 and allocate CapEx from 2026 to initiate a restoration project at the prison? With the commencement of the new prison scheduled for this year, and given current financial constraints, restoring a facility slated for demolition within a year is not a sound investment. Furthermore, the logistics of displacing inmates present a significant challenge, as our Kingdom Partners facilities are facing the same capacity constraints that we are currently experiencing. Then I have MP Peterson. What was the origin of the fire, and what were the conclusions to what happened there? The fire at the Point Blanche Prison is still an active investigation being carried out by KPSM. And then what caused the discontent? I think I've answered that one a couple times now regarding that. So that brings me to the end of the questions for round one.
Minister Tacklin, thank you for those answers. Members of Parliament, you now have the opportunity to ask any clarifying questions that you might have based on what the minister has responded. Is there a yes? I do see that we have MP at this time wishing to make use of this clarification part. MP Veronica Janssen-Webster, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chairlady, and good afternoon to the Minister, her support staff, my colleagues, and the people listening and viewing from the Tribune. The Minister did not answer my question directly in the list of MPs where she answered the question, and my question was answered in the general part. So I'm just asking or just indicating so that I would not be limited if I want to ask questions in the second round. Because my question had to do with the statistics, and the minister did answer that she is awaiting the statistics to be provided. The minister also indicated, via you, Madam Chair, the minister also indicated some statistics, so she gave us some numbers. However, the numbers that were given, there were also numbers given in the news. Yeah.
MP Janssen-Webster, just give me one moment here to make sure that the camera situation is addressed. Okay, let's try it again as I invite MP Janssen-Webster to take the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chairlady. So regarding the answers given and the reference made to answers that were published, I had a question about answers that were published or numbers that were published, and I don't know if I can ask that clarification here now or if I should have that as a second round question. Because there in the newspaper, I think it was last week, Thursday, there were talks about the fines increased by 110% in the first half of the year. And the minister also mentioned something like that, but I wanted to know, because in the newspaper it wasn't clear. It said in 2024 there were 877 fines.
MP Janssen,
Yes.
just let me get it clear whether the minister did react to that particular topic, in your opinion, in her answers.
Yes.
Okay, then you can ask what she said to be clarified, indeed, in clarification, because that was your question to
yes,
me.
because yes, you see the mix-up came that the minister started with MP O.E.C, and on the list I was the first one, and I didn't. So but the answer came already in her general elucidation. So the question was to clarify if indeed the amount of fines were increased by 110% only in the first half of the year. Just if that is so. So that means you double the amount of fines that you give in the first half of this year. Just if you can say yes or no to that. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Veronica Janssen-Webster. That clarification request was clear. I continue with MP Doran at this time. MP Doran, you have the floor for clarifications.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Good afternoon, one and all again. Thank you to the Minister for the answers provided thus far. I have two clarifications. With respect to the DEE training that the Minister referred to, is the training still ongoing? If not, when did it start and when did it end? Secondly, Madam Chair, I heard the Minister drew reference to the insurance policy for justice workers, I believe police, if I'm not mistaken. But I remember the acting Minister of Justice during the budget debate mentioned that the policy was in the final stage. Now today we hear the actual minister say that it's in discussion with finance to see if they could actually get a policy. So I'm a little confused where that is concerned. If I could get some clarity on those 2 points. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, MP Doran, for your request for clarification. I do see another member of parliament having some clarification questions, and the next MP is MP Lacroes. MP Lacroes, you have the floor.
A blessed afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady, to the Minister and her support staff, my fellow colleagues, and those in the Tribune. Madam Chair Lady, a little wider concerning the question MP Durant just asked, the life insurance. I understood that there were people that paid the life insurance since 2016 up to 2023, and that some monies should have come back to them. I got a message from someone asking about their 1,740 guilders that should have been paid back to them. Some agreement like that was made. I don't know much about it, but maybe if the minister could look into it, if it's not something that she is fully aware of, that would be appreciated. And one more question, if we will see in this new budget that is going to come, an expansion for more guards up by the facility, up by the jail. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP Lacroes, for that question and asking the minister to either clarify or maybe ascertain the response to your question that you have gotten. I don't see any other member requesting clarification, so I look to the minister. Minister, the questions that have been asked for you to clarify, do you need a few minutes for those? You can go straight into clarifying those questions posed by members of Parliament. Minister, I invite you to take the floor on the request for clarification.
Yes, I'll start with MP Janssen's question. I actually have the data right in front of me, so I can provide you with that. Indeed, so these are then the numbers from over the first 31 weeks of the year in 24 and 25. So in 2024, up until week 32, there were indeed a number of 877 fines issued, as you correctly mentioned the number. And comparison to this year, the number is 1,845. So I don't know if that comes up to 110%, but yeah, I think about that. Maybe I should look at MP De Weaver and see with her quick maths if it's correct. Moving on to the next clarification question with respect to the DAE training. I was trying to find here quickly. March? Okay, so the DAE training was indeed it was one that happened over multiple periods. So they would have an instructor come and then leave, and there were different modules that were done. So I believe it was over a period of 2 years or so even. But I know that it concluded in March because that happened while I was here. And right now we're indeed looking to see if we can, we're in discussions even with Miami-Dade to look if we can even look at using our partnerships with them to be able to give additional training and not have to use DAE for everything all the time. So that's one of them. Clarity for the insurance policy. You are correct in saying that there was a discrepancy. The discrepancy happened because the file had come back from the governor, and then upon fixing it, we saw that it then covered the year 2024, which, you know, if you go back now and pay today for an insurance from last year, and it's over 300,000 guilders, it doesn't make sense. So we said, let's go back now to the drawing board and look for something that makes sense and covers the justice workers that feel like they deserve coverage and not just the police or immigration. So we're, again, looking again to see how we can reevaluate that and take it into 2026. Because I think what happened was just with the back and forth between the governor and us, you end up a year further. So that was unfortunately the situation, and why at the time that that information was given, the file was being worked on under the assumption that it also covered this year. But that wasn't the way that it was set up. So we had to go back to the drawing board, and that happened within the past weeks. Then, what's the next one? Oh, can I ask through you, Madam Chair, the MP for clarification on how it is with the money being owed? Then maybe I would.
Sure. Let me allow MP Lacroes to maybe elaborate a little on the question that he indicated he got. Maybe you have some additional information, MP Lacroes, to clarify for the minister your question.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. So I'm going to read a question clear as it was asked to me. What happened to the monies deducted from the justice workers from October 2016 to 2023 for the insurance company? name. Government never paid their part, but was deducted monthly from the justice staff. Will these monies be refunded back to the staff? A total of $1,740 was owed to justice workers who took that insurance, who
Okay.
opted into
Yeah.
that insurance.
From
Clear,
my,
Minister?
yes, from my understanding, up until 2023, there was an active policy. The renewal of 2024 was actually a renewal of that previous policy that existed since 2016 and the unfortunate incident where we lost Benji here in town, that was that policy. But that was the information that was given to me by the ministry. But let me go back and verify and then let you know what will happen and if there were conversations about reimbursements, because there were a number of Council of Ministers decisions taken, and I can't peek too quickly to across the hall for the previous minister that was in the COM then, but we'll go back and figure that out, and then before I give any false information here on the honorable floor of Parliament. Yes? Then, oh, I got it whispered here. Yes, you will see, so for right now, we've taken up an additional, that we could hire a new class, let's say of 15. So you will see that reflected in the 2026 budget. That was it for the clarifications.
Thank you, Minister Tacklin, for those answers to questions posed in the first round, as well as the few posed during the clarification segment of this meeting. Members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, we now go over to the second round of this public meeting of Parliament. And according to the speakers list, I give the floor to MP Veronica Jansen-Webster. MP Webster, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the Minister, I would like to ask if, I would like to commend the Minister for the GED classes that are starting back, and I wanted to know if there is any discussion or any thought on computer access, even computer access, let's say, for classes as well, or computer classes. It doesn't have to be online, but I know that there is issues with opening online for prisoners completely, but that limited would have been good, and it was also a request from them at the time. So if you're also looking at anything, doing anything with computer classes or computer access. And then also, again, commendation for the 15 people that you're trying to hire for 2026. Will that be enough, or are you looking at also having more people in 2027 and doing it in a phased approach, hiring? And how many people do you think will be enough, or at what year would you reach the amount that you need to run the prison in the best and optimal manner? Thank you.
Thank you, MP Veronica Jansen-Webster. The next speaker, according to our speakers list, is MP Darrell York. MP York, you have the floor. Oh, MP Darrell York is not here, so we go over to the next speaker on the list. And because I see him entering the hall, I shall just give him a moment, and that is the next speaker is actually MP Lyndon Lewis. MP Lyndon Lewis is now in the hall and will be seated shortly. And MP Lewis, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon once again. Good afternoon, Minister. Nice to see you here. And my honorable colleagues. I hope you ain't too long. Through you, Madam Chair, can the Minister confirm whether the committee established by the former Minister Anna Richardson to assist with a more transparent and effective process for the legal placement of the LBAs of all justice workers is still active? And if so, what progress was made with that team? 2, as former Minister of Justice myself, during my tenure, I also had a team in place comprised mostly with the HR and the P&O personnel, okay, which successfully initiated 7 batches in 6 months and 3 weeks. Minister, I did also understand, so this has to be removed pertaining to batch 14. As you mentioned, batch 14, it's on its way. But I just would like to know, in a more accelerated process, how we can get it done, because we're basically, I think, about nearly 8 months forward. I know there's some hiccups. I know that a colleague left, and this is one of the questions as well. Because I understood now with the SOAB process, I understood the same colleague that left is the one doing the validation through SOAB. I would like to know if that is so. That is information that, that reached to me. My question 3 I probably might have to take out, but I would like to reiterate. On Justice Day, June 17, 2025, the minister publicly stated that by the end of the year, all LBAs will be completed. I stand corrected. Can the minister also explain how we're going to get it done, if we have the necessary manpower now to do so? Through you, Madam Chair, can the minister clarify whether phase 1 of the Lance-Busley process include justice pensioners and those who have resigned in order to determine the total amount required for payout calculations? It also determines the budget, the following budget. What measures is the minister taking to avoid unnecessary litigation related to justice workers' LBAs? I also understood that it was stated by you, Minister, through you, Madam Chair, that you would also like to avoid court cases. Does the ministry agree that litigation costs could be better allocated towards serving justice employees? Through you, Madam Chair, this following question also came from, I got it from Curacao. Union representatives in Curacao been asking pertaining to the function book of the Coast Guard. If I can get an update on the function book for the Coast Guard personnel. I think I did ask questions pertaining to the police station in a deplorable state. Yes, so I think that was also answered. But I also received this week, yes, I had a meeting where some are still complaining pertaining to mold. So I just would like to know if there's any assessment being recently done with regards to mold. Has the ministry assessed, through you, Madam Chair, the ministry assessed and properly restored the police holding cells? If so, what were the findings? Question 9, I had to reframe it as you already spoke about the insurance as well, because that was coming again. So now that you mentioned, Minister, through you, Madam Chair, thank you for your response regarding to the insurance for the personnel of KPSM. But I would like to know if the other civil servants have the same type of coverage like the police, meaning the justice workers at the Point Blanche Prison, seeing the situation already that also happened with the fire. It's of one of my concerns, the Coast Guard, Customs, etc. To elaborate further, I know that the rechtspositie for the police also entails immigration and Landsrecherche. So I would also like to know if that insurance also covers them from the police. Okay? So in light of the fire incident at the Point Blanche Prison and house of detention, and the tragic case of a fallen police officer killed in the line of duty, can the minister, through you, Madam Chair, provide clear update on what concrete measures are being taken to ensure the safety and security of both justice employees and, by extension, of course, the people of St. Martin? Minister, it was brought to my attention, and through you, Madam Chair, I would like to know what are the official deadlines for the renewal of contract for police officers in operational or in executive functions that have already reached the pension age. It was brought to my attention that there's a top brass within KPSM that was supposed to go on pension from since '62, and they have gotten, I stand corrected again, I think probably third or the fourth contract being renewed, and many of them find it very unfair, as they would like to know, aren't we preparing for the next generation to take over? What is your stance on that, Minister? And if there is a deadline, as I just requested, for the renewal of contracts. I don't physically work KPSM, Minister. These things come to me. And they find it unfortunate that the individual still wears the uniform, which is also for them dangerous because you have surpassed your time. You're also driving dienst autos on the expense of the people, and they feel someone else needs to take over. What specific plans does the minister have to ensure? No, I said this one already. So given that many justice workers face financial hardship, including difficulty in paying rent, school fees, utilities, what immediate steps will the ministry take to finalize the payouts? Referring to my other question, as November 26, 2025 will be approaching, and you will have about a year in office, Minister. Has the ministry identified any administrative or legal obstacles that are delaying the completion of any batch? Anything? What are any obstacles that the ministry may have? And if so, if there are obstacles, what is being done to overcome them? Through you, Madam Chair, how many justice workers are still without finalized legal placement to date? And can this figure be broken down based on the police, the prison, immigration, customs, Coast Guard, etc.? Bear in mind, Minister, that I'm also waiting for my placement decree. Has a budgetary impact analysis been completed for the total payout required for all justice workers, including pensioners and those who have resigned? If so, Minister, can you share that report?
MP Lewis, I need to remind you that actually your time in this round is up, so if you can just finalize that.
I actually was close to the last one. Okay. So, Minister, given the deadline of November 26, 2025 for the finalized, no. All I need to know, Minister, basically the accountability measures that the minister will accept and the commitment thereof. The commitment on having these LBAs finalized by year end. I put it to November because that's when you make a year, but of course December 31st is the year end. I will conclude here, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Lewis. And I immediately go over and give the floor to MP Ottley. MP Ottley, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good day to the Honorable Minister once again. Madam Chair, I hear the Minister speak through you, and the Minister spoke of some progress made at the prison during her tenure. And while I understand that when we come on the floor of Parliament, especially in the view of the public, we need to, show that progress is being made. But let me point out that, like my colleague echoed in the beginning, urgent meeting. This was an urgent meeting call since May. And we are here today. And some people may have a disconnect for those watching in the public and thinking that we're carrying on issues over and over again. But granted, this was an urgent meeting call by then. I hear the minister, honorable minister, spoke about the progress since the fire. She spoke about Family Day through you, Madam Chair, spoke about GED program, the sewing program, and also the music program. But Madam Chair, the Family Day, although very gracious for it, was before the minister's time. So the specific question was progress made since the fire. GED has started back. The sewing room, in which we all visited during our meeting at the prison, one person is using the sewing room and not even an inmate. The music room is not being occupied as well. Why? Lack of guards. So the inmates cannot even partake in these. And this was stated to us, and it's still the same situation, lack of guards. See, Madam Chair, we browse over certain things, and thank God Parliament has clarifications, because when clarifications are brought up, like from MP Lacroes, we understand that, oh, I need to verify and check and go back, because we try to give the image that everything is on the up and up. And that is a very, very good clarification from MP Lacroes, because this is on the life insurance of the police officers. Madam Chair, through you to the Honorable Minister, we spoke about the unrest at the prison, and it was said that the inmates, quote unquote, had a unrest due to prisoners being released, or the notion, or through the media, of prisoners being released for the same crimes that they are being detained. And the minister spoke as if it's not true. Because we have an issue at the moment, overpopulation, overcrowding, and persons are being detained and released due to lack of space. It was also stated, Madam Chair, through you, that the ministers was under the prisoners was under the impression that the ankle bracelet is a substitute for sentencing. And I hear the minister speak of this over and over in different medias and different realms, and even referring to the motions that we presented here in Parliament, that was passed in Parliament, as if we are presenting this as a substitute for sentencing. I know that never came from me, nor the motion. What this was, and has been recommended by the courts and those via the Netherlands, is to institute this to help with the issue and help relieve those prisoners that were on their way out, never as a substitute. And if the prisoners are confused, they were not the only one confused as it pertains to the way that people are being released at the Point Blanche Prison, Madam Chair. The minister states that it's fair, it's clear-cut. Well then, certain members of Parliament is confused. Many lawyers, many law firms are confused, because in doing the motions, through you, Madam Chair, I sat with different law firms. And it has been said that there is no clear-cut measure across the board. Madam Chair, she can speak for herself, I'm pretty sure, but we have a lawyer in here who seemed confused as well, because there's no clear-cut measure across the board. The only person saying that is the minister. Speaking of that, I understood that a draft policy was sent to the prison lawyer. If this is true, and if it's true, can this draft policy be sent to the Justice Committee? The minister is supposed to, based on the motions, return in September with an update, but if a draft policy is sent, we would definitely love to see it, because the Honorable Minister answered the question of MP Franklin Myers and say, all the ministers, justice ministers, initiated such release policy. So I would like to see where and what this minister contributed. Madam Chair, the Honorable Minister said that there was no charge for housing prisoners in Bonaire besides the travel, and prisoners are on their way back. And in the same breath, the Minister speaks about discussing with Aruba and Curacao for housing specific inmates. So will Aruba and Curacao be free as well? I would like to know that, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I heard the minister speak about prisoners being released upwards, having discounts of 60%. And then I see 50% on another article. I would like to clarify which is it. Is it 50, 55, or 60%? Also through you, Madam Chair, when I asked the Honorable Minister about Aruba's discount of 10%, the 10% was not based on VA or early release. It was based on an additional 10% based on resocialization, rehabilitation, not being in problems, and way to motivate these prisoners to better themselves as they will eventually be released. Because I keep saying it, St. Martin rarely does life sentencing. So which means that 95% of them will be back in our society. It is also mentioned in the governing program, the fact of rehabilitation. So I look forward to seeing that. The minister spoke about data needed to confirm whether crime increased, decreased. Madam Chair, it's not a competition. Whether crime increased or decreased, I don't need data to tell me we have an issue. I don't need to wait on data to tell me we have an issue. And I've even sat with the Honorable Minister of Justice and rendered and offered advice. And I see some of this advice has been taken, whether we acknowledge it or not. I see the presence being improved of police officers. But I do not want us to move in the direction of stigmatizing as if only scooter drivers commit crimes. So I'm still waiting on a clear-cut precision way forward. Because then I see the Indian merchants saying, we want security, we want more progress, and then I see the minister saying, we are doing what we can do within our realms. So where are we going to meet? What is the update on the request from the Indian merchants on protection of Front Street? I have 1 more minute, so I'll leave it right at there, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Ottley. And I continue now, and I give the floor to MP Roseberg for her questions in the second round. MP Roseberg, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Lady, Secretary General. Welcome to the Minister of Justice and the support staff and all in the public tribune here today, and to my colleagues present at this moment. I firstly would like to start by congratulating the Minister in regards to the EU-funded rehabilitation opportunities, because that's a must. So I cannot ignore that, and I'm happy to see that progress is being made in regards to that, because currently there is a lack in regards to rehabilitation programs for inmates. That being said, I have the following questions. My colleague MP Ottley started already, but I would like to further my questions in regards to what was brought forward. It was mentioned that the ministry is currently working on a policy. In that policy, I would like to know if what was stated in the both motions, if that is also being taken into that policy, and also to know, and also how it was mentioned to get a copy of that draft policy, as also suggested can be through the Committee of Justice. Other than that, I also would like to know, seeing that there is a lack of guards, how many guards are currently out on sick leave, and is there a plan to evaluate that as well, seeing that it's quite clear that there are more guards needed. That's a process. Other MPs already asked how it will, the increase will take place over the years, but currently what we have, how many guards we currently have and how many guards are on sick leave, and what is being done in regards to that. Seeing the fire that recently has taken place, I would like to know what the current capacity is of the Point Blanche Prison. I can remember it was 80 capacity. Are we still there? Is it less? So I would like to get an answer in regards to that through you, Madam Chair. Then the famous Articles 132, 137. I can currently dream those, but in regards to Article 137, I could have asked it in a clarification round, but I chose not to do so. But I would like to get some clarity and maybe it's an additional question, so I use it for my second round. On one hand, when I read the law and the law states the Ministry of Justice, but then the Ministry of Justice is the one that can decide in regards to an urgent measure as capacity to release inmates. That's one, that's what the law states if you read the law. Then, on the other hand, I have read in several articles, and that's why I don't want to have the misconception and the confusion out there in the public that it's being mentioned that the CCR, the prison director, and the probation office are the ones that can decide on that. But I don't read that in Article 137, and I just want to have it clear so that everyone knows who's the one that decides and who's the authority that can make that decision. So, to clarify, is it the Ministry of Justice, so the minister, that can decide based on the law, or is it other parties, CCR, prison director, public prosecutor office, or probation office? Other than that, in the timeline in regards to the proposal, I already asked that question, so if I can get an answer in regards to the proposal and if the motions will be also incorporated in that. Also to get clarification, it was mentioned, I think, in the introduction in regards to the sewing room, and I understood my colleague MP Ottley also mentioned it, and the music room, that those are operational. Just to get that clear, Minister, if it was recently checked if it's indeed operational. Also in regards to the carpentry shop, because there seems to be a little misunderstanding there, and I just would like to know if it's really operational or not. Other than that, let me see if there are other questions. No, I do think that that is it for now. I just would like to get those questions that I posed answered, and then if needed, I will add some other questions to it. I'll clarify. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Roseberg, for those questions. The next MP up to speak in this second round is MP Lacroes. MP Lacroes, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Madam Chair Lady, through you to the Minister, I've heard so much talks of that specific word, rehabilitation. So the question I have for the Minister is, what is her definition of rehabilitation? That is question one. Then my next question is, for example, if I committed a crime when I was 17, 18 years, was incarcerated, did my time. 20 years later, is that still being held against me for whatever reasons? That is a question that I'd really like the legal part of it from the minister, but I'll also like her personal opinion on that question. So I'll repeat the question. A crime was committed when an individual was 17, 18, 19 years, did 1 year in the penitentiary. It is 20 years further. How does the minister view that? And someone that has never again come in any contact with the justice system. That is the question. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP Lacroes. I continue, and the next MP up to speak is MP Kotai. MP Kotai, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A good afternoon to all, to the Minister, my colleagues, support staff, those in the Tribune, and those tuned in via social media. Minister, thank you for the answers from the first round, through you, Madam Chair. Firstly, before I dive into my questions in the second round, I'd just like to commend the Minister for taking on this role due to the moving parts on a day-to-day basis. When it comes to our justice system, as we can see, every day can be a real challenge. I do see an increased patrol over St. Martin as of the past week, mitigation of bikes, and of course, many stakeholder meetings over the course. It is to my opinion that we must be more vigilant, especially entering the high season. We have to focus on how we can keep working together, business owners, island-wide, government, our citizens, as we also do have to take responsibility of our own. The questions I want to touch today were some from the budget debate, which still remain unanswered due to the response being the information was not shared from the prosecutor's office due to the time. I do see this information as necessary. So, firstly, how many convicted persons are still awaiting to serve their sentences in Point Blanche? Is this information being treated as a secret by the prosecutor? I do believe this is vital for the country to know. How is it decided which individuals from this group actually serve their time? Is there a particular criteria used? Usually we hear that it is case by case, but I believe it shouldn't be because government decisions must be based on transparent and established policies. How long can a person remain free before they're required to serve their sentence? Is there a statute of limitations? Many of these questions, as I said, I've asked before, and I'm repeating it as it was said. Due to the time constraint, we couldn't get the information divulged from the prosecutor. Additionally, how many people have been arrested for gun possession in the last 2 years, and how many of them are actually serving their time? Violent crime continues to rise. While the police are making arrests, the real question is how many offenders, if any, are actually ending up behind bars? How much leniency is given to first-time gun offenders? We know that they are a major problem in our society. It is too easy to obtain one, too easy to rob any store across St. Martin, too easy to target tourists, and too easy to victimize our own locals. Of course, I heard the minister mention plans are in place to track the gun source, which I commend as well. Furthermore, we do need concrete ideas to improve our community safety. The excuse of not enough police cannot stand on its own. For example, in New York City and many U.S. cities, off-duty police officers are permitted to work as security guards. I've often heard the rumbles that most individuals are against this, yet it works elsewhere. But if this cannot be done here, then what are the alternatives? I would like to hear the further proposals in mitigating our issue as a whole, moving further. And all in all, as I mentioned, I appreciate what I've seen over the past week especially, and I continue to look forward to, for us all actually, to work with one another to find the concrete solutions to solve this long-term issue that we're facing. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Kotai. And the next speaker up, according to the list, would have been MP Weaver, who is not present with notice. And then the next speaker would be MP Franklin Myers. MP Myers, you have the floor. There's no need at this time for MP Myers to make use of the second round. So I go over, and the next MP would have been MP Irian, who is not present, and the next one would be MP Peterson, to whom I give the floor at this time. MP Peterson does not see the need following the answers provided by the minister to questions in the first round, and I then give the floor to MP Dimar Labega. MP Labega, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. Thank you to the Minister of Justice and her support staff. Minister of Justice, I'd like to thank you for coming in and giving a follow-up to the questions. I would also like to congratulate the ministry as well as KPSM for the job they've been doing. It's very noticeable that the traffic situation has gotten better, especially with the scooter riders and all the reckless riding, so great job there. Also great job on securing the funding for the rehabilitation programs for the prison. This was a major concern of mine. Over the last couple of justice meetings, I have inquired about specifically people that are waiting to serve their sentences from the ages of 18 to 25. Reason being, we have to make sure cater to that age group, especially when they return out of prison from their sentences. I know in some countries, especially the United States, you have an expungement programs where it was mostly for juveniles, but I would like to see a program, we spoke about it privately, but I'll say here publicly, I would like to see those young offenders that have less serious crimes, they have the opportunity to come out, participate in communal programs, whether it's GED, trainings, etc., because as we know, it's already difficult to get a job in our job market. Now, once your employer requests a conduct report, and that is negative, it increases the chance of not getting it. So I'd love to see a program where we could work with the prosecutor and justice and the court for Bogorad, where these young men or women have the opportunity to earn that second chance and have a clean slate. So with that being said, thank you again, and that'll be all.
Thank you, MP Labega, for that contribution to these discussions. And Minister, we have reached the end of the list of speakers in the second round, and I look towards you in terms of responding to questions posed by members of Parliament. Minister, what's your response?
I can answer them now.
The minute you can immediately go into the answers. Minister, then I invite you to provide answers to the questions posed by members of Parliament.
Yeah, my mic's on. Yes, there might be some that when it comes to specific data that we might have to follow up in writing, but for the most part, I got you. All right. So if I can go just straight into the answering then, with your indulgence, Chair Lady. Yes? Yeah? All right. So I'll start then with MP Johnson-Webster. When it comes to, the first was more, I think, a remark question. When it comes to access to computers, allowing computer access, computer classes, this is something that we're looking at and is part of also that soft component design that we will be working on with UNODC. So to see, how we can facilitate something like that. Then I was asked about that phased approach to hiring. How many will be enough, and at what year will we reach the right amount? So one of the things, of course, we have a current function book for Hervey Bay. That function book will need to change for the new facility because we'll have new needs when it comes to that new facility, also different type of security and things like that. So one of the things that we need to look at, and that's also a task of UNODC, will be actually coming up with that formation and that function book for that new facility and what it needs to look like. So at this point, we don't have an exact figure of how many guards we will need for that new facility or how much staff will be enough, because that will also depend on the choices that we make when it comes to rehabilitation programs, what types of things we want to be able to provide within the prison. All of those choices are going to inform eventually what amount of guards that we need. And also we're using much more technology in order to be able to check and see what's going on. So for example, in the design of the new facility, the way that we have the towers now, there will be no towers in the new facility. Everything will happen via CCTV and a central point of control. So all of these will also affect our staffing numbers and how we utilize the staff that we have. The 15 for next year is also meant because we really need that additional impulse, and the current staff are really suffering under the conditions that we're having them work in 12-hour shifts with small amounts of people, and that compounds sick leave as well. So that's why we're trying to give them that breathing room and bring in that additional 15, and then start assessing what that growth plan needs to look like towards 2027 and 2028. Then I get to MP Lewis. Can the minister confirm that the committee established by Minister Richardson is still active? And then I know I heard about multiple committees, because I believe there was a committee from Minister Richardson, and then as you said, you yourself had a committee. And what we've done in this process is look at how we can, as quickly as possible, assemble the batches. So those committees, as they existed under Minister Richardson's tenure and years as well, were reshuffled a little bit. We're getting assistance from the different HR departments, and in one specific situation, somebody from KPSM that I know was involved in your committee has also been assisting us in compiling those. So not in the format that you were used to them, but we have been utilizing those individuals still to provide us the information. Then is the same colleague that left the one doing the validation? I know that there's a team at SOAB conducting the validation process. So that is, for SOAB, how they're utilizing the staff that they have. Can the minister explain how we're going to get it done by the end of the year? We've been really putting all our resources into this, to the point, that even my cabinet staff is involved in helping and trying to see as much as they can. And, it shouldn't be necessarily work for the cabinet, but because we think it's important, that's where we're putting in as much resources as we can to ensure that it's getting done by the end of the year. And then in that respect, we've also revamped the objection committee. We have a new chair of the objection committee and a new secretary, and they have already started the work of compiling all the old objections that were there that were also lodged in different places for us to try to clean up that process and have a plan. And they're currently working on their new work plan and their plan of approach for that, and hope to update us soon. So all of these components are going into us really trying to quickly get through both the objections that have been there pending for too long, as well as the ones in that new procedure. And then I have part of the question here, because it said, does phase one, I think it was phase one, include the pensioners, and another group was mentioned? And then what measures is the minister taking to avoid unnecessary litigation related to the justice workers? So phase one is just everybody that was in service as of January 1st, 2023, up until today. So if you went on pension prior to January 1st, 2023, unfortunately, you will not be in phase one. It means that you will come after that. And of course, in phase two, we are looking at giving preference to those individuals who are already at the pension age, and, of course, looking at giving them their payments with priority. And what we're trying to do to avoid unnecessary litigation, I agree, litigation costs are one that I always love to avoid if we can, because I think that money can be better spent somewhere else. But sometimes it's also inevitable, and coming from a background as an attorney here as well, I realize that here in St. Martin, we also like to take people to court, and we don't like to settle as much. We rather a judge tell us that we're wrong or we're right than have to admit it to one another. So I know that no matter how many safeguards you put in place, you're always going to have an objection. You're always going to have an appeal. And that is also, as through you, Madam Chair, good MP pointed out to me in a parliamentary meeting as well, everybody has that right to object and to appeal. So we don't want to take that away from them, but what we're trying to do to cut that back is having those individual discussions, and again, giving that provisional LBA along with the entire validation file is being provided to the staff, so they can look to see how the ministry came to that decision, and then they can object at that point to the objection committee before the LBA is final, so that we hope that then they don't have to end up in court after the fact and have to pay lawyers and things like that. So, is any system perfect? No, but we're hoping that what we've seen in the previous systems, that we can minimize the having to go to court. Then I think already I said, the litigation cost was covered. When it comes to the function book of the Coast Guard, I can confirm that yesterday, as part of the Landsbesluit Rechtspositie Kustwacht, that function book has to then also be approved by MBA, signed by the Minister of AZET, and that was done yesterday. So actually you were ahead of me, because after this I was planning to go back to the office and inform the Coast Guard, but now they know from this. So it has been approved in that respect. Then I have about the state of the police station. That is also a big concern of mine. And you know, in my, again, those are not things that happen from one day to the next, but I hope within my tenure that I can secure a new police station for the police as part of our plans, because that building does not meet the operational needs of KPSM, and it's also not a great place to have our people work. I spent a lot of time there during the prison crisis, because we had a little crisis room over there, and it rains and water is in the hallways. They have foil bins catching water. There's mold. There's, as I've also been informed, and we're in discussion with the Ministry of General Affairs, because it is a government building. It does not fall under the responsibility of the Ministry of Justice, unfortunately, to get those repairs done. So we are in discussion with facilities to see what can be done. And again, in the long term, we're looking at how we can facilitate that. We're also working with the NRPB as part of the emergency repairs to the police cells. There was also some work now, which we've been told, will help with the lifespan or the operationalization of that building, not only for inmates, but also for staff. And so we're looking at how we can cover those expenses, because they exceed the amount that we've been provided by BZK. So it might be that come 2026 budget, there's a CapEx reservation in there for me asking Parliament to assist to help us with some repairs to the police station that can at least stretch the lifespan of the building while we figure out if we can get funding to build a new one. Has the ministry assessed and properly restored the police holding cells? What were the findings? That process is ongoing. That was one where the emergency repairs were paid for through BZK. What we've done so far is we fixed the plumbing. There was more remediation done. There was painting done. And right now we're awaiting new toilets. The new toilets were ordered in order to change out the toilets, because we were having some issues with the plumbing and the way that they work. Sometimes they break. We can't find the parts anymore. So we're also looking to replace them with toilets that are meant for that type of facility, because you often get individuals held there, of course, destroying the property. So we need to make sure that also, and then ordering spare parts as well, because I've said I don't want that when the toilet breaks, then we can't find the parts, or you have to wait 6 months. And so that is also ongoing. And one of the other things that needs to happen, new mattresses were ordered, and we're in the process of also getting the roof repaired, because there were some roof repairs done as part of the World Bank procedures, but those only covered the building in which staff was housed, because the World Bank could not do anything with a detention facility. So now we're looking to repair the roof over the inmate cells, or that part of the prison, the police cells. Then I have, what about the other civil servants? Do they have the same type of coverage? And that's part of my concern with passing that LB the way that it was, because indeed it was only for the individuals that fall under that rechtspositiebesluit. And I think that, and indeed our staff at the prison do not fall under that, customs, and all the other ones that were mentioned. And I think that that's why we want to sit down and see how we can cover all our justice workers and give them the protection that they deserve based on the level of risk that they have in their job. So that's one of the things that we're looking at then, to do it a little differently. Can the minister provide a clear update on what concrete measures are being taken for the safety of justice employees? That was a very broad one, but I think that insurance is a start. And of course, looking at equipping our staff too with the right gear, with, sometimes we have uniforms falling apart, vests old, all of those things. We're looking at how to implement improving those. And right now I'm also in the middle of getting an assistance request from the Dutch police, the Nederlandse politie, where they'll be providing us with riot gear and uniforms and training for our staff. So that was one that I have been pushing for with them, because even, I would, to give that training to our guys to know how to deal with a riot, and not just our arrest team knows how to arrest somebody. That's a very different situation that if you just have unrest, even when they go into the prison, that's a very different situation. And if you're trying to arrest somebody that committed a crime, than if you're going in there to try to stabilize a situation. So we're working on all those things, and in the finalization phases of getting that, those materials. what are official deadlines for the renewal of contracts of police officers who have already reached the pension age? And aren't we preparing for the next generation to take over? That case is actually one that we are looking at, and to see indeed what is feasible and what type of planning are we doing, and how long do we keep individuals within an organization. So we are looking at this specific case to see what we will do with that one. What steps will be taken to finalize the payouts? So again, for phase one, those payments happen as you get your LBA. Typically with that next payroll, you'll then also get that retroactive payment from 2023 up until the time that you receive the LBA. And then when it comes to phase two, those will be budgeted annually in the budget, and then of course paid out in accordance with the different agreements that were made already on a CCSU level and prior to my tenure. What are the obstacles with the remaining batches and what is being done? Honestly, I think the obstacles have just been it's very labor intensive in putting together these batches. We're pulling from so many different places, but right now I think we're progressing nicely and smoothly through the process, and we're doing everything that we can. Whenever we see any potential of a delay, we make sure that we get ahead of that. So I think we have a pretty well-oiled machine going right now, and everything is on track to finish in time. The overviews of the batches per department, the overview I had was until batch 13, but I can get an updated one and send it to Parliament in writing. And then I wasn't too sure I really understood that last question about accountability measures to meet the deadline. But I will say at least that I have always prided myself as being a person of my word, and I had this situation recently with staff where I said, look, I will get it done for you by this day, and if it's not done by that day, I'll help you myself to write the press release, not a minister full of it. But we didn't have to, and we're progressing through it. But I'm also one. I think we're trying to just be transparent, and I see the importance in this, and I've said it throughout Justice Week as well. We need to also recognize our justice workers in not just words, but actually show them results and show them what they mean to us and that their work matters. So we're definitely staying on top of that deadline and making sure that we meet it. Then MP Ottley's questions, or they weren't many questions. There were a lot of statements that I feel like it would be remiss for me not to respond to some of them at least. There was a mention made, that seemed to indicate that the minister was running away from this meeting or didn't see the urgency of it, and I find it important for us to correct that narrative immediately because I think it's a disingenuous and dangerous one. This meeting was called in May, and then indeed I did have some travel to Strasbourg, but when we tried to reschedule this meeting, there was actually the budget debate, and that is why this meeting did not take place then. And following the budget debate, Parliament went on recess and only just reopened this week. So I think that we need to say that it's not that the minister didn't see the urgency in this, but that they were actually matters that were outside the Minister of Justice's control. Then, there was also a statement made that makes it seem as if I didn't tell a true story when it came to the insurance and that it's for our justice workers. But again, the insurance clarification was us looking at broadening that net to actually include more justice workers. And besides that, I've also continued to say whether the insurance is in place or not, if something happens to an officer tomorrow, this government is liable. And whether or not that insurance is there, because the law says the government is responsible for it. The insurance is there to mitigate the minister's risk or the government's risk, the country's risk, should something happen. Should something happen in which something happens to 10 officers at once, how in God's name will we pay their families for that? That is what the insurance is meant for. But it doesn't mean that we are sending our justice workers out on the street in danger and not to be covered. That is absolutely not true. And I also want to make sure that I correct that type of statement as well. And yes, I think we are making progress. We've made a lot of progress, and I think that as a country, as a Ministry of Justice, we should be proud of that. And I definitely won't try to ride on the coattails of my predecessors. I'm continuing the work that was laid out before me by many before me. And I think to say that things were, that the progress are things that were happening already, but we did have a fire and we have restored that facility to an extent. And I think that credit needs to be given to the staff of Point Blanche and to this ministry for the work that it has done. And to make it seem like no progress was actually made because there was already a GD program and there was already sewing and there was already a family day, I think that that's also unfair to the men and women that show up every day in this country. So again, when it comes to the GD that did continue this week, I have pictures of the sewing class as well to show that there's multiple inmates in the sewing class and not just one person. So, and I also have pictures of the family day. So I'm happy to provide those to Parliament as well. Then when it comes to early release, I've tried in so many different ways to answer those questions when it comes to Articles 132 to 137 and the frameworks that were there, yes and no. And I hope that, when we respond to the motions of Parliament, that we'll be clearer in those and bringing that clarity. And individuals are being released early here constantly. I can't say every week because not every week is somebody released from Point Blanche because of the nature of the crimes that they commit and the length of the sentences that they serve. But there are people being released here every day far under the amount of 60% of their sentence served. And to go to that, which percent is it? He said, yeah, I see 50, I see 55, I see 60. This depends every time on an assessment made of what is the current situation. And again, Article 137 is only applied when the prosecutor indicates that there is an urgent need for space. And that's typically, saying, oh, Minister, we need space today because, we have people that drove into our resort in Simpson Bay in front of our tourists. And we need to create space to put these guys in Point Blanche because we cannot tell this community that they will be back on the street and that you see them under the tree next week. And that is when you apply 137. And what we look at that point is who has served the longest of their sentence. And we have overviews with percentages, with individuals, where you see 62%, 60%, 58%. And we look at, what is going to happen in the coming time. And these are also not things that we want to very much tell the public publicly, oh, look, we let out this person with 50% or 55%, because that does something to this community as well. And, there's a sentiment here where we're almost encouraging crime to an extent too, and we need to, I think, be safe and think about what it is that we're saying. On the front end, we want to create an environment where, of course, nobody likes it that after 10 days we have to release people and put them back. Because we've continued to say in St. Martin, when one person doesn't go to jail, everybody knows who it is. Everybody sees them walking on the street. And that is something that we take very seriously as a Ministry of Justice. And we talk about the treintjebeleid. And right now we're even in discussions where we're applying, as much as, indeed, if you have served 50%, that we will look to see what type of capacity do we need. So, I hear about, I've seen and read the motions and we will be responding to them, but again, it's why I want to assure Parliament we are giving people reductions of a lot more than just 5%, 6%. We're in discussions now is going as low as 50%. And that is a serious thing, and I really want to have that, to really make that clear when we stand here and act like the minister isn't doing anything, that it's not a fair thing to say, because we are making space. So this was to the comments of MP Ottley, and wanting to really go in on those and what it is that we're doing. So then I was also asked about a document from the lawyer of the Inmates Association. Indeed, a draft document that was not yet finished was shared with us, and we did not share it with Parliament during the budget debates, given that it was a document provided to us by a third party. So we wanted to have that individual's permission to share it. But I also think the good MP has good contact with the Inmates Association, so he should be able to get it. So then I was also asked, will Aruba and Curacao be free as well? Those are different types of discussion that are going on. So there's no indication in terms of Bonaire. That was immediately after the fire. That was DAE that assisted us. With Aruba and Curacao, we're looking at capacity assistance when it comes to our firearm crisis, which we should call it a crisis, and looking at being able to create some space to be able to, again, alleviate at the front end of what we're doing and not having to send people home after 10 days. So we are in discussions with them, but they, of course, also have their capacity constraints. Then I was asked, what is the update on the IMA and Front Street? We are in discussions with, we had a meeting actually last week with the VKS because IMA had a proposal wanting to have VKS patrol in town, looking at what their capacity is. Right now, VKS even has issues meeting the operational needs of the Point Blanche Prison and fulfilling the agreement that we have with them there. And one of the things that we're planning is also an integrated plan, and KPSM has an integrated plan and approach for the safety of this entire island. And not that we don't discount what is happening in Front Street, a place where our tourists tend to center, but crime doesn't only happen in Front Street. Crime happens all over this island, and we have to be able to respond to it. And we're looking at integrated approaches because you also don't want to create situations where you heavily center presence in town, and then the next thing, the crime will happen in Maho, it will happen in Simpson Bay, it will move to Kupukoi, because it will find the path of least resistance. And we need to be able to respond where possible, and we're looking at how we can keep everybody safe in this country and have an integrated approach to crime and how we use capacity that we have. So we are in talks with VKS to see how they will be able to further supplement the police operations. And we think by keeping all the areas safe, we will automatically keep Front Street safe as well. So those are discussions that we're having. And we will also be sitting, with the IMA to explain to them and bring to them what our integrated plan for the safety of the island is. Then I move on to the questions from MP Roseberg. As I mentioned, the policy, in terms of those percentages or how we're applying, and also taking into account what we can from the different motions, will be sent separately to Parliament, and we'll update and see how we can tweak that. Then the question was, how many guards are currently on sick leave? What is the plan to evaluate that, and how many do we currently have? It's not a big number in terms of how many staff we currently have, and maybe I could provide that in writing to the MP. But the amount on sick leave we're currently assessing, and what is the plan to evaluate that? We're actually looking at bringing in a bedrijfsvoering specialist that can come in at the prison and help us to look at our bestand there and see, who is on sick leave, who cannot work anymore at all in the prison, who can we maybe move to other parts of the ministry, and kind of look at how to alleviate and create room in the function book of the prison and its operations. So those are our plans, and actually we have a trajectory right now with Teo, where we're hoping to get funding from them to be able to bring in a specialist to help us to assist management up there in order to do that, carry out that exercise. Then I have Article 137, who decides on capacity is the minister or other parties. Uiteindelijk, at the end of the day, it's the minister by ministerial decision. And the minister takes that decision on the advice of the prison director and the probation services and the CCR. But of course, the minister has discretion to deviate from those advices should the minister so wish. But to answer the question, whose authority is it? The authority of the minister. Yeah, I think that was the same as. And then with what is the current capacity of the prison? That was staff, right? Or oh, sorry, through you, Madam Chair.
Were you asking?
For a clarification for that question, yes. What is the current capacity of the prison, whether it was related to the staff or to the inmate population?
MP Roseberg, could you explain so that the minister can then provide the answer correctly?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. It's in regards to the population, inmate population, yes.
Thank you, MP Roseberg. Minister, you may continue.
Thank you. We have capacity for 80 males, and currently we have 2 females, but normally we have space for 6. So a full capacity of 86. And then move on to the questions. Oh, no, sorry. Then have we recently checked that the recreational rooms are operational? I was actually there on Monday with the State Secretary, and I did see the new GD room, which was very nice, and I think in a better location and nicely painted and redone. And then we also have seen the sewing room that's been put back together. So those, when it comes to the, which one was the other one? No, it was to do, I think, with the workshop. The workshop is still not, the carpentry shop has still not been restored, no. That was one of the ones that was severely injured after Irma injured. But yes, the room was injured. Sorry about that. Yeah, there was damage after Irma. And I think there was issues there with funding and how to fix it. And so has not been, it's been quite costly to make those repairs, and then also to have, I think the gentleman that used to be able to give those workshops to them has left the island. So then that also oftentimes is an issue when it comes to those types of programs. So if I've checked that they're operational, yes, and I've been receiving daily updates from the management team. MP Lacroes, what is the minister's definition of rehabilitation? You know, I think there's two things we look at, right? Rehabilitation and reintegration, and I think we need to look at those two together, because I don't think you can expect somebody to be rehabilitated if they can't properly reintegrate back into society. So I think that's what we're taking, a consolidated approach there of also how do we make individuals ready again to re-enter this community, or you know, how do we create opportunity for them to re-enter the community? And then maybe I'll take immediately the question after, because I agree with you as well that people deserve a second chance. And it shouldn't be that 20 years later a crime is still held against me. And there is right now a police record policy that's applied by the ministry when it comes to the request for a declaration of conduct. So of course the crime that you commit can affect your ability to get a positive VOG, as we call it, for as long as it falls within what we call a historic review period. So that period is normally 4 years. But if you received an unconditional prison sentence, then it's 8 years plus the time that you served. And then I also have here that with respect to persons with a juvenile criminal record, a period of 4 years is applied. So it's a shortened term. And then of course, if you have no antecedents in your criminal records, it's 4 years. If no prison sentence was imposed, 4 years. And if you had an unconditional prison sentence imposed, it's 8 years plus the time in detention. But then I will also further elaborate on this, because what we have, the policy that we have right now at the ministry is that we look to see what is the purpose of that police record. So we look at what the individual needs it for, because at some point we can't close them off from the entire community and then expect that they can reintegrate or rehabilitate themselves. So some of the things, it's, you know, if you want to open your own business, we will grant you that police record. If you want to go work and need a security pass for the airport, you're not going to get the police record, because the airport has heightened security requirements, and then typically we're quite strict in how we apply those because of international norms and standards that would apply for the airport specifically. But typically for other purposes, we'll look at that specific purpose of what is the reason that you need it, and then we typically do tend, even if there's an objection, looking at it to see, okay, well, or does the crime really, if you were convicted, let's say, of abuse of children, and then you want to become a teacher, then we're gonna not give you a clean police record. But if you want to open your own business and do something else, and sell chocolates on the corner, sure. So we really look at that in order to give persons a chance to reintegrate and rehabilitate. Then I have the questions of MP O.E.C, and for most of those, I'm going to have to follow up in writing and discuss with those numbers with the prosecutor's office. And then I also had the ones that didn't relate to any data, because the first couple of questions all were requests for numbers and data. Then I had it was a comment, a question about off-duty police working as security guards. Indeed, this is not an option that we're jumping at the bit for to apply here in St. Martin, also because we have a very small number of police officers. And if we have that police officers are working in their off time as private security guards as well, that can also compound sick leave, and or you have people calling in late sick to work because they want to go work a private security job, and those types of situations. So it's not the best level of or the best option, I think, for St. Martin, but it's one that was presented to the ministry recently and that we discussed with the police. And of course, then I was asked if this cannot be done, what are the alternatives? The alternative we're looking at right now is strengthening the capacity of VKS and seeing then how we can use and leverage VKS to grow and to also assist the ministry. And then finally, I had a question from MP Labega. People waiting to serve their sentences 18 to 25. That one I will follow up on, but I think I did just answer the MP's question when it comes to, you know, how we deal with police records for youth and how we deal and how we look at that. So that then brings me to the end of the questions in round 2.
Minister Taklin, thank you for the answers provided. And we're at the end now, at the end of the answers in the second round. And of course, the opportunity is afforded to members, if the need is there, to ask the minister to clarify anything that she might have said in the second round in answering the questions. I don't see any indication of any member having that need at this time to pose questions to have a matter clarified. And thus, Minister, we want to thank you for your answers, as this would then bring us to the end of this public meeting of Parliament. Members of Parliament, thank you for your participation. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, those of you who were tuned into this meeting, for being with us, and of course to the Minister and her support staff and the staff of Parliament. We thank you, and I hereby close this meeting of Parliament. Meeting closed.